Eerily haunting true stories about remote abandoned locations rich in history. Come with us, now travels from state to state, if you dare.
Be the last time anybody sees us alive. I don't know where she has us, but we're gonna get fucking killed.
Hello? Gina, there is a beehive over there. Do you see that in the hole?
Buckle up, Buttercup.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Welcome to 50 States of Madness.
Hi, good
Hi.
afternoon. I'm
Hi.
Shannon.
I'm Gina. What's going on?
Nothing much.
Nothing much.
No, not at all. Football season started. I'm excited.
Yeah. How about them Steelers? Woo, woo.
Did they win this past weekend? I didn't see a game. Did they play
We're
their
on a roll.
preseason?
I mean, it's preseason,
Yeah.
so I can celebrate and whatever.
No, shoot. A
And
win's
everybody-
a win. I don't even know.
Everybody, my new boss is a Cowboy fan,
I'm so sorry.
and so he's got the office decorated in Cowboys. Got a Cowboys flag hanging in the classroom, and so I came to work, and he's like a diehard fan. So I came to work last Friday because we played Thursday night. I was like, hey, you want to talk football? He's like, it's just preseason. It's just preseason. I was like, oh, okay.
I see.
All right. That's how we're doing it. It's just preseason. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so I'm excited for football.
Yeah, so am I. Well, tomorrow I'm going to USC to watch USC
I don't
play
like college
Nevada.
ball. I can't do
love
college ball
football.
because there's too many rules. It's a little different than the NFL.
It is a little different.
They've actually added some. They're kind of pretty similar now, but not a couple years ago, but probably say 10 years ago, the rules were a lot different for college football. There was a lot more rules in college football than there was in the NFL. And I was just like, I can't get behind it. It would just confuse me. I'd be like, why didn't they call that? Why did they call that? It was just too much for me.
I think in some ways they're different. They're more lenient, in other ways they're a little bit stricter. So it just kind of goes back and forth. But yeah, but me, I can watch both. I love them both.
But before we start, I want to ask you something. I put up a Patreon episode, a little snippet of a Patreon episode.
Okay.
And I was just giving them a little, the Patreon's a little taste of what I get to deal with and
the behind the scenes.
I get to be surrounded with before we record every week. So I posted it, and I always send our Patreon videos to Uncle Creepy because he always promotes the show. He always is he's just a good tech guy, and he's always on it. And so I just want to read you some messages that he sent for you. But
it was my singing video.
So he was completely blown away by your.
I tell you.
Well, here's the thing. So
Search.
So I posted
Star Search. I don't even know where I got Star Search back in the 80s. Not even American Idol. Star Search.
I posted on the Patreon you doing karaoke to Jessie Reyes.
Love her.
But then I privately messaged him a couple of your videos that I wish to God I could post on social media, but I cannot. So I'm heartbroken that I am not able to share these videos with everybody. But I did share a couple of them with Creepy. And one of them was when we were in the parking lot at the gym and you were singing on your carpool karaoke.
You sent him that one?
Yeah, I sent him the one of you singing Tupac. If anybody out there is familiar with Tupac, she was singing Hit 'Em Up. And she had never heard the song before. So
how did I do?
So she was.
Is it the hit 'em up, hit 'em up? No. Okay.
She doesn't remember what she was singing.
I don't.
But anyway, he sent me multiple messages about how just obsessed he is with your singing, and he wants you to go by the stage name of MC ADHD.
I get it.
He thinks that would be good for you. So he messaged me And he said, I was wondering, does Shannon or would she take karaoke video requests?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Okay. I figured that you would.
I would.
So he's already sent you one. So I'll share that with you after we're done recording. If anybody has any requests from songs that they would like Shannon to sing, rap, whatever, then
this is amazing.
You guys can just DM us.
My dream has come true.
Yeah.
I'm getting song requests. That's hilarious.
Yeah, he's very Team Shannon. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I told him if he was ever in the LA area, hit us up because he wants to meet you.
We'll go to a karaoke bar for sure.
I told him that I would wait to ask you like live on air so you couldn't prepare, so he would see your actual true reaction when I asked you. But I said she's gonna be really excited to know that people are gonna like send her requests, because this came upon because I told him I had invited you to go see Frankie Perez and you had never heard of him, so you downloaded all of his music, you learned his songs, and then we went to Vegas and you sang every single song with him.
Yes.
So
I said, and where was that other place? We went to a bar, and it was a bar in a skating rink. Was it?
No, it was a bowling alley.
A bowling alley.
Brooklyn Bowl. Oh no, Brooklyn Bowl's in Vegas.
No, it was here. Yes, Lucky Strike. Lucky Strike here. And
she sang with them.
Oh my God, I'm gonna get chills. My favorite moment is when he came down and I had the mic and I was singing along with him. That was my favorite moment. I'll never forget it.
Yeah. So that's how that came about. And then so he wants to know if he can send requests. So if anybody else out there has requests.
Yeah. And if nobody has heard Frankie Perez live, please, you need to hear him live. Nothing like
the voice of an angel.
He's amazing regardless. Like
my favorite.
Yeah, he's amazing regardless. But when I downloaded all the songs and I learned them and stuff, I knew he was great.
Mm-hmm. But to hear him live
was just magical. Mm-hmm. Like he became my favorite artist after I heard him live.
Yep.
So
nothing like him.
Yeah.
So so Creepy's very familiar with Frankie Perez. So maybe you can. I can record you singing some of Frankie's songs.
I have
too.
a few of his on repeat on my playlist.
Yeah.
That just goes over and over, that I love. There's 3 of them I know that just
Well, maybe you can start with those 3 and then
I'll create an album.
Yeah.
Well, today we are going to do another serial killer who I had never heard of before.
I've never heard of him either.
Until I started researching, but it's because it's a serial killer who hasn't been caught.
Right.
So it's somebody who's out there. They just don't know who this person is.
I always wonder how many there are out there that haven't been caught.
I'm sure there are so many.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in a location that's similar, I would think, not geographically similar, but just similar to the killing fields.
Right.
So the name that they dubbed him attracted me to this to this actual particular article, and he's known as the West Mesa Bone Collector. So I thought that name, I was like, wait a second, what is this about?
Yeah.
So
that's to be a bone collector, I don't know.
Yeah. So this is in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's a quiet city of roughly 500,000 people with a crime rate more than double the national average. In 2007, the city's only missing persons detective had a list of 16 sex workers who had disappeared in the city between 2001 and 2006. In 2009, 11 remains would be found in Albuquerque's West Mesa. Eventually, 9 women from the detectives list would be later identified. The West Mesa is a stretch of land on a high desert plateau that rises up over the Rio Grande in New Mexico. Based on many scenarios, it would seem that Albuquerque's West Mesa has long been a dumping ground for gangs, pimps, and drug dealers. So that's where I'm like, it's kind of similar, because that's how they kind of described the killing fields as a dumping ground.
Well, and same thing with Long Island serial killer, with the sex workers, and, they're just out there in the open marsh, and it's just a dumping ground.
A dumping ground.
Yeah.
And I would think the killing fields too. I mean, I think
Yeah.
a lot of those were women that, you know, led a very high risk lifestyle.
Yeah.
So it took the Albuquerque police weeks to uncover all the bodies, which were scattered over a 92-acre swath of land owned by a home developer.
That's a big area.
Huge. I don't even know what it would be
92
equivalent in miles.
acres. So the killing fields is 45 acres. So it's
Wow.
double the killing fields. And the killing fields goes from Houston to Galveston.
And when the women were first left in this area, there was nothing around. But, you know, as they started developing more homes, more people, it started encroaching onto this area.
Right.
It took nearly a year to identify the victims. Satellite images between 2003 and 2005, which I find amazing, and I never thought about that before, is to look at satellite images.
Right.
Show tire marks coming in and out of the area along with disturbed dirt patches.
Imagine flying a drone
Yeah.
over that.
I just think, like, you know, you're comparing, like, oh, okay. So you can kind of get a timeline of when these women were left, because now, there's a new dirt patch. Oh, there's, you know.
Well, and these are probably areas that aren't traveled very much. So it's like, why would a car even be in there?
Yeah. It was
Are there tire
undeveloped
tracks
area.
there? Yeah.
Yeah. In 2006, when a housing development began to encroach on the area to build a retaining wall to keep some of the area from flooding, this had exposed the bones to the surface. On February 2nd, 2009, Christine Ross went out to walk her dog, Ruka. She lived at Westside Albuquerque in a beautiful suburban neighborhood where families felt safe. She walked her dog to an area that was cleared to make room for a new housing development, so she took her dog off the leash. Ruka was super excited to be running around the lot, but soon after returned carrying something in his mouth. It appeared to be a stick or broken piece of wood, but as the dog got closer, she saw that it was a bone. She took a picture of it and sent it to her sister, who was a nurse, and she confirmed that it was human remains.
We've had a couple stories where
the
killing fields was actually one of them, where a dog brought, and then it was also
the one where baby. What's the little girl who was found 40 years later?
Tina and Dean Klaus, right?
Yeah,
but the baby.
Klauses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Where the dog had found the bone.
Yeah.
The sister, who was a nurse, confirmed that it was a human femur, which is the thigh bone. Authorities were called out to the intersection of 118th Street and Dennis Chavez Boulevard on the southwest Mesa of Albuquerque, and the remains of 11 women and girls were found between the ages of 15 years old and 32 years old.
Oh, my God.
Along with one fetus. All but one of the women were known to be involved with drugs and sex.
So one was pregnant.
Yeah. It was the most horrific murder case Albuquerque has ever seen. While serial killers are not uncommon in the western United States, New Mexico's largest city had never dealt with one before. Police promised the families of the victims that solving the murders was a top priority, and initially that seemed to be the case. Investigators assembled a team of detectives, bringing in FBI profilers and working with law enforcement agencies around the state to try to figure out how the bones of 11 women had wound up in the desert. Now it's more than 14 years after the first body was discovered. Police still have no official suspects, and Albuquerque has largely forgotten about what was once known as the city's crime of the century. Dirk Gibson, a professor at the University of New Mexico who has written 2 books on serial killers, said that a combination of remoteness of time and geography made it so that there has been little pressure on the police to investigate.
Oh.
Officially, the cause of death for all 11 women was homicidal violence, but the truth was medical examiners and forensic experts couldn't determine how the victims had been killed. No witnesses have come forward, and there was virtually no forensic evidence at the burial site, which meant that there was nothing to tie the victims together except their shared grave and high-risk lifestyles. And we're going to find out, too, as we start reading, is that a lot of the women knew each other. So as far as we're concerned, like the sex work industry there, like a lot of them ran in the same circles.
Right.
George Walker, a private investigator, started receiving cryptic, taunting phone calls and emails from someone claiming to have information about the killer, but the lead still hasn't panned out. He states that there's a possibility the killer has come and gone. Serial killers move, and that's why they don't get caught, Walker said. If he didn't get caught, I'm sure there are more victims somewhere. He could possibly be on the loose in New Mexico or another state. And we talked about that with Rex Humerman, who traveled to South Carolina, who traveled to Nevada.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can be anywhere, anyone. I mean, it could be multiple. They just have no idea.
Well,
the reason why they're tying them together is because of the location in the shared grave. So,
right. Even though, like, with the Long Island serial killer, you know, they shared, like, a common grave, I guess, or dumping area, but they were killed in two different ways. You know, you had the 4 girls that were in the burlap sacks and they were bound, and then you have the other ones that were dismembered. So it's like, is that the same person? Is that 2 different people? Is it somebody trying to change things up to throw people off? Is it, you know?
And it's so hard when they find the body so long after they were buried.
Yeah.
In the weather, it's just, there's nothing left to determine the cause of death or how they were killed.
Yeah. And with this, like, you know, it's hard because, I mean, I don't know. I feel like, once sex work is involved, they're just kind of like, meh.
They find out who the victims are and then they're disinterested.
Yeah.
And they're not really pursuing it.
Yeah. And that's really sad.
It is.
Yeah. So one victim was Evelyn Salazar. She was 27 years old in 2004 at the time of her disappearance and was the 10th West Mesa bone collector victim to be identified. She and her cousin, Jamie Barella, who was the final 11th skeleton to be identified, went missing after going to the park together. Jamie was only 15 years old. Jamie's mother stated that she left the house in such a hurry that she left her curling iron on. Jamie was just a normal teenager. She had no ties to prostitution or drugs and only once ran away from home. On the contrary, Evelyn had a history of sex work and used drugs in the past. Still, she was a caring mother for her 2 daughters, Mariah and Angel, as well as an excellent cook. Both cousins went to a family gathering on the day they vanished, which was set to take place at a park near the International Sunport. When they didn't come back home, their families got worried. Jamie had none of her personal belongings with her because she had plans when she got back home. About a week later, the 2 were reported missing.
Monica Candelaria was 21 years old when she vanished. Monica was loved dearly by her family since her birth on June 20th, 1981. She was still young when she gave birth to a son and led a high-risk lifestyle, convicted of prostitution once. She might also have had ties to local gangs in Albuquerque. It's also possible that she was struggling with substance abuse. About 2 weeks after her disappearance on May 15, 2003, a missing persons report was filed for her. Despite attempts of her family to find her, Monica's case became cold until her discovery in 2009. Isabel Candelaria said at Monica's memorial that God answered my prayers. I asked if I can put her to rest before I go, and he did. Monica had a way to get into your heart, her laughter. She had the most beautiful laugh. I can still hear it. They used the memorial as a time to remember the happiness she brought to their lives.
God, some of these are so sad.
They are.
The next one is Victoria Chavez, 26. She disappeared on June 5th, 2003. However, more than a year passed until her mother reported her missing. Oh, man.
I think a lot of times because these girls, they made a habit of disappearing and coming back, disappearing and coming back.
Yeah.
So,
how sad. She was convicted of prostitution 5 times, and the missing persons report describes her as a known drug user and prostitute. Victoria was reported missing by her family in 2004. In 2009, her remains were the first to be identified after being found intact in a grave 18 inches deep in the New Mexico desert west of Albuquerque. They were identified through dental records provided by the family when they reported her missing.
Virginia Cloven was 27 years old and lived in the outskirts of Albuquerque in a trailer with her family in Los Chavez. She was said to be a fun-loving young girl who had a positive impact on people around her until her brother was murdered. Tensions at home escalated and she ran away from home to live with her grandparents before living with her subsequent boyfriends, one of whom was a convicted criminal. By 17 years old, she was homeless and fell into prostitution and substance abuse after cutting off most of the contact with her family and friends. She was last seen on April 13, 2004, in the same area that the other victims would also disappear. That day, she called her family to tell them that she was probably going to marry a man who was just released from prison. Oh, wow. After not receiving any more phone calls for months, Robert, Virginia's father, reported her disappearance to police in October. Cloven's remains were found together with the other West Mesa bone collector victims in a curious addition. A plant bag that was found to have contained a spearmint juniper, an evergreen tree commonly used in landscape design. And I just kind of want people who are listening just to kind of remember that, because it's going to tie back to maybe one of the suspects.
Right. So. Solania Edwards was 15 years old at the time of her murder and was the only African American and the only victim with ties outside of New Mexico of the West Mesa bone collector. She was from Lawton, Oklahoma, and she was only 5 years old when her mother went to jail. At that point, she was placed in custody of the Department of Human Services in a home for victims of abuse and neglect. She was living in Lawton, Oklahoma, when she ran away. Police said that she was in Aurora, Colorado in May of 2004 and may have associated with prostitutes in that city. It is not known when and how she traveled to Albuquerque. Unlike other victims, she had no friends and family who could give additional information about her affairs or report her missing in the first place. Police officers suspect that she may have been a sex worker along the I-40 interstate corridor and that she was traveling alongside 3 other women under a pseudonym. Police say that she was killed sometime between 2004 and 2005. These are all like within...
Yeah, it's all together. That's
like 2 or 3 years of each other.
Yeah, I think...
It's a busy person or people.
Yeah, it's super close to each other, and they were all discovered all at the same time. Yeah. So Doreen Marquez was born August 31st, 1976 to David Marquez and Dorothy Gonzalez in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was a 27-year-old mother at the time of her disappearance on October 10th, 2003. And you're going to see that most of them were mothers.
Yeah.
She had 2 daughters named Destiny and Mercedes. Doreen had a cheerful personality and cared for her daughters a lot. However, after her boyfriend was in prison, Doreen turned to drugs. Her mother ended up taking custody of her children and kicked her out of the family home. However, she told her she could return on the condition that she stopped using drugs. On that October day, she officially went missing. She was seen dropping off her friend's son at the Calvary Christian Academy. However, a friend came forward to say that Doreen was actually last seen in a downtown neighborhood. She was reported missing in December of 2004, more than a year later, because the family was not sure whether she was actually missing. She would often just vanish and reappear after a couple of months. But this time she actually disappeared and would never come back home. And Marquez had no known history of involvement with sex work. Not to say that she wasn't, but they're saying that she was never arrested for it.
Yeah. Cinnamon Elks was 32 years old when she went missing. She also was friends with 3 of the other victims, Victoria Chavez, Gina Michelle Valdez, and Julie Nieto. Cinnamon disappeared from Albuquerque, New Mexico on August 20th, 2004. A missing persons report was filed on December 15th, 2004. In March 2009, her body was identified. Diana Willem, the mother of Cinnamon Elks, said that every time they find a body, you think, oh dear, is this it? And then she received the news she's been dreading. Now Cinnamon's loved ones are finally getting answers, but it's the ending they hoped they wouldn't have to face. Diana reflected on her daughter's life and said that drugs stole everything from her. She had 2 children addicted to drugs. They start stealing your checks, forging them for money, and from there, I don't know if it is shame. They quit coming home at all, Diana said. Growing up, Cinnamon was a near perfect child. However, when she was a teenager, she began to get into trouble. She eventually became addicted to drugs and alcohol and was arrested on numerous occasions. To support her drug habit, Cinnamon stole checks and forged Diana's name on them. Eventually, Cinnamon turned to prostitution to earn money she needed for drugs. Because of her dependency on drugs, Cinnamon missed out on raising her own 2 children. She would disappear for long periods of time and then return with the intent of becoming sober. During the many times she was gone, Cinnamon would always remember to call Diana on her birthday. However, in the summer of 2004, Cinnamon stopped calling home. Cinnamon had been staying with a guy named Art Johnson, a.k.a. Bennett, in Albuquerque before she vanished. Art, who Diana described as weird, was the one who called Diana and told her that he was worried because Cinnamon was missing. Diana said that Art claimed that he and Cinnamon were roommates, but she mainly just used his place to keep her clothes at. They reportedly were not a couple. Johnson lived 13 miles from the Central Avenue location where many of the victims frequented. Shortly before her August 2004 disappearance, Cinnamon would tell her friends that a dirty cop was chopping off the heads of prostitutes and burying them on the West Mesa. According to Diana, Cinnamon once took off to El Paso, Texas with some other people. Diana says she is unsure of the reason for the trip to Texas, but suspects they were meeting with the Mexican cartel that did business in Albuquerque. Diana now feels that Cinnamon may have known too much, and for that reason she was killed. She also claimed that one of the victims, Virginia Cloven, had called her to tell her that Cinnamon and Gina Michelle Valdez were murdered long before the bodies were discovered.
So,
I mean, when we went to Texas at the beginning of the year, we stayed one night in El Paso.
yes.
And the cartel is the real thing. Like, it's nothing like I expect. Like, I didn't expect to be that close to the border.
Our motel,
I had no idea.
our parking lot,
was on the
gate,
border.
literally the fence behind our motel was the border fence. Like,
yeah, I didn't.
I was a little creeped out by that too.
Yeah,
Only
like,
because I know there's so much.
Riffraff going on right there. Like,
There is. There's a lot of crime on that side of the border. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the town that sits on the other side of there. It's Juarez?
Oh yeah, Juarez.
Juarez.
Yeah.
And it's known for its crime and drug and the cartel.
Yeah, and I told Shannon that first of all, if we ever go back to Texas, we're flying.
Yeah.
I'm not making that drive again.
It was a long drive.
But if for some reason we have to drive, we're not staying in El Paso.
No. That was scary. Especially just for the two of us.
Just for two of us too.
Yeah.
So
that was really scary. Gina Michelle Valdez was 22 years old when she disappeared on September 22nd, 2004. Dan Valdez, Gina's father, reported her missing in February of 2005. While she already had two children, Angelica and Jeremiah, she was 4 months pregnant when her body was discovered years later in February 2009. Gina's mother was devastated that somebody would do this to my daughter and dump her like she was a piece of trash and leaving her lying out there with no dignity. I am devastated and angry. Angelica Garcia was 4 years old when her mom went missing. Not having my mom was hard, she said. According to Gina's father, she was a fun-loving girl. She brought light into the room when she came in. She was always happy-go-lucky. Hardly ever was she down. It has taken a while to settle in only because I'm reminded every day about it, so I don't have any time to myself to really sit down and mourn. God only knows why this had to happen to her because she didn't deserve it, and neither did the other women.
Julie Nieto was 23 years old when she disappeared from Albuquerque, New Mexico on July 15, 2004. She was reported missing by two women by the names of Melody Carmona and Angela Romero. These women, it appears, reported her missing separately via telephone, and they did so 1 month apart. They both claimed to be related to Julie Nieto. However, upon interviewing Julie's real family, it was discovered that neither Carmona or Romero were related to Julie. That's just weird.
Yeah. They don't.
That's like a red flag to me.
And that's exactly what
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
This led police supervisor Carmen Spratley
Yeah.
to report that Angela Romero and Melody Carmona were both persons of interest in this case. In March 2009, her body was identified as one of the victims found in Mesa. Her mother, Eleanor Grego, remembers the last time she saw her was on the day Julie's grandfather had an outpatient procedure done. Sometime after that, Julie's son had a surgery scheduled, and Julie was a no-show. It was then when Eleanor knew something was terribly wrong. Eleanor stated that Julie would never have missed her son's surgery. That's when Eleanor and an aunt of Julie's reported her missing, and that's when they found out Julie had already been reported missing by Angela Romero and Melody Carmona. Julie had a sister, Valerie, that she was very close to. Both sisters had a drug problem. Valerie had been arrested once, and while in jail, she wrote a note to her family stating that both she and Julie had been threatened. The family speculated from the note that the threat was over missing drugs. Many other stories surfaced, including them being chased, and they had to run for their lives. They had also reported to the families that they had once been taken to Manzano Mountains, an hour outside of Albuquerque, by a truck driver who then brutally raped them. Also, Julie was terrified of a police officer named David who had called for her at her grandfather's house once. Right before Julie went missing, she stored some of her belongings at her grandfather's house. After she went missing, her stuff was stolen from the shed they were in. In 2007, Julie's sister Valerie was found dead in a hotel room from an overdose. However, her family believes that her death was suspicious and that the sisters' deaths are related somehow. Eleanor stated that after Julie went missing, but before Valerie passed, that Valerie had been arrested and called from jail saying, "They killed her, they killed her."
So there's a lot of suspicion, like we found in other stories with the crooked police.
Yeah.
This one's with drugs. It's funny how you kind of see the same story thread when it has to be dealt with, like prostitution and a lot of cover up.
Yeah. And we just read a lot about that too in the last story that we did too. And it all has to do with sex workers, you know, it makes you think.
Yeah. Same story.
Yeah.
Veronica Romero was 27 when she was reported missing by her family on February 14, 2004. She was last seen a couple weeks prior when, according to witnesses, she got into a white pickup truck at the corners of Wyoming Boulevard and Central Avenue in Albuquerque. Veronica was an only child growing up, but had a large extended family and very close friends. She had 5 children of her own, and when she went missing, the whole family distributed missing flyer posters. They felt that the police were not doing much to help find her. Veronica was the 7th victim to be identified from West Mesa.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the suspects in this case.
There are a few.
So police believe the women were all murdered by the same person, but no official suspect has been arrested and charged. In 2010, an award of $100,000 was offered for any information that leads to an arrest and conviction of the person or persons responsible for these murders. The police began looking into a list of people of interest. One person of interest was a pimp by the name of Fred Reynolds. He knew one of the missing women and had photos of missing sex workers. However, he died in January 2009. And that's another thing, too, that happens a lot is sometimes, unfortunately, by the time, you know, these are cold cases, but by the time detectives get around to working these cases, a lot of the people have passed away.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Another potential suspect was a man named Lorenzo Montoya, who lived only 3 miles from the burial site. In 2006, there were dirt trails that led from the burial site to his trailer park. He was known to be violent, making death threats to his girlfriend, saying that he would kill her and bury her in lime. He was also arrested twice for violent attacks on sex workers. In December 2006, Lorenzo strangled a teenage sex worker in his trailer and was then shot and killed by her pimp when he caught Montoya carrying her half-naked body to his truck. After that, the murders seemed to have stopped.
So some of the families believe that Lorenzo Montoya was the person who did this.
Right.
So I think it just depends on the girls' stories and where they were at, where the parents
It's a lot
lean.
to investigate, and it's like, so when you think about how many, like, the clientele that these girls have,
whole list of suspects.
I mean, where do you start?
It's
and
crazy.
then is it even one of them? Is it somebody that they know? Was it just a random, like,
were they just an outlier? Were they part of a serial killer?
Yeah.
You don't know. And already we went through 2 suspects, and already the first 2 suspects, they're dead already.
right?
So they can't even be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
In August 2010, police looked into a photographer and businessman named Ron Irwin, who had several properties in Joplin, Missouri. They searched those properties and confiscated thousands of photos he took. He would visit the New Mexico State Fair, which is held near the burial site, but they cleared Edwin as a suspect because they did not find anything that tied him to the murders. However, I wanted to point out some of the photos they found, though, the police are still asking for help to identify some of the women, because we're going to put them up here, and I just want to, give a little, I don't know, what do you call it when you say like a little precursor? Like, I want to tell people to beware. How do you say that?
Oh, okay.
What is it? What do you call that?
A little warning.
A warning.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was like, what are you talking?
Oh my God.
Little warning.
It's getting worse. I just want to give people a warning before you look up, if you're looking at YouTube. Some of these photos might not be appropriate.
Yeah.
Or you might not be
graphic.
ready. They're pretty graphic. They're women who are unconscious in these photos.
Oh, God.
And they're different women. And so, we're going to put a few of them up, but police are still searching to identify some of these women, and they don't know if their bodies could be out there buried.
Yeah.
And still haven't been found.
Right.
So in 2014, the police began looking into a man named Joseph Blee. He came under suspicion due to his odd behavior and repeated stalking of sex workers in the area. He would frequently expose and stalk sex workers along a street known for prostitution, Central Avenue. And that's very important because one other girl that we mentioned, she was picked up in a white pickup truck at the corner of Wyoming Boulevard and Central Avenue. The girls, and I didn't mention the street, but the girls the two sisters who claimed that they were being chased down a street, it was Central Avenue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this street is known for this type of activity. And in one article, it was described as a war zone. So there
Sounds like Beach Boulevard.
Yeah, there was a lot happening.
Yeah.
In Stanton,
Yeah.
California. Not that we're want people to head there.
No.
So his ex-wife, April Gillen, asked Albuquerque police to investigate him since he was previously accused of raping a 14-year-old girl with a screwdriver. He was dubbed the mid-school rapist for some of his activities in the 1980s. He would break into homes of 13 to 15-year-old girls and rape them. They had DNA on the suspect, but it was not until 2010 when the DNA was retested and linked Blee to the rapes. In 2015, Blee was also suspected by police of killing a sex worker. His DNA sample was located on the inner waistband and belt of a sex worker found dead on a notorious street for sex work in the eastern part of the city. In addition, a tree tag from a nursery was found in the area where Virginia Cloven's body was buried. It was tracked to a nursery Blee once frequented. Blee would buy plants from nurseries that sold plants from California. So I don't know if that made sense, but he would go to these nurseries who sold plants from California. The spearmint juniper was traced back to a nursery in California. So that's why I said about the spearmint juniper that was found near the body of Virginia Cloven. Blee had women's underwear and jewelry not belonging to his wife or daughter in his home, and allegedly told a cellmate that he had hired the West Mesa victims, who he called trashy. Blee in the mid-school rape case was sentenced to 36 years in June 2015 at 58 years of age. So he is one of the suspects who could be tied to some of the girls. Yeah. Maybe not all of them, but I just find it's funny how each one that they mention, very good possibility. It could be that they're all the killers of some of the girls.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of coincidences, but again, not enough. And I feel too like that could happen in like a lot of cases, is where there's a lot of evidence that points towards them, but is it enough?
Could it be them? This one they do have DNA. So if they can get DNA from
this
the
one
girls,
is a little,
and I'm sure with the ones who were shot and killed, could they get DNA? I don't know, a lot about it, but could they get it if they extracted them? I can't think of words, from their gravesite and grabbed.
exhumed.
Okay, exhume them from. I can't think of
Extracted. You get a tooth extracted.
Okay, same thing. Just pull them out. Just pull them out from there and grab their DNA. Can we do that from? I mean, I guess if we can do it from bodies who have passed away, we can do it from theirs as well.
I would imagine. I mean, I
And
feel
match
like
'em.
today they can do anything.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
very
feel like
interested.
today it's nothing. You know, they can do anything.
Yeah. So I'm hoping they catch them eventually. Now that they're finding the bodies.
Right.
Well, they found the bodies, but now that DNA is getting better. It's been 14 years though. Just get on it.
Since the 11 women and girls have been identified, 8 more missing women whose disappearances may be connected to the murders may also be linked to the same serial killer. All 8 women were reported missing between 2005 and 2006 and were in the same line of work. The past 14 years, Ida Lopez, a retired investigator working for the Albuquerque Police Department, is determined to find justice for what she calls her girls. I feel like that happens a lot, like, especially when we were talking to like Gil Carrillo and stuff, like they become personally invested in these cases, and like this is what they eat, sleep, drink, everything. Like this is, you know, their life.
They're determined to solve it.
Yes. She has taken on the responsibility of learning as much as she can about these girls and found that most of them came from disadvantaged backgrounds.
And I have to say, while researching for this, that a lot of the information came directly from her on what these girls were doing, who they were,
Yeah.
interviews with the families,
Yeah.
to just get a sense of who they were,
Yeah.
outside of
I
their
think that
sex
plays
work.
a big part in you got to know what crowd they hung around with, what kind of crowd they hung around with, you know, their people, what they did. That plays a big role in all this, you know.
Absolutely.
But again, takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
To figure all that out. Working alongside her is another retired investigator, Elizabeth Thompson. In July 2018, there was a false alarm when a construction crew discovered human remains near the site where the 11 West Mesa victims were discovered. The State Office of the Medical Investigator quickly determined they were likely Native American bones circa 1100 to 1300, unrelated to the disappearances. That's crazy.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff out there.
Out there, yeah. On the 13th anniversary of the discovery of the remains, Ida Lopez stated that this is someone who had access to the women. This is somebody who was very comfortable with the place that he buried the girls, had concealment. It's someone who prays, who's out there, who's a predator. These women were loved. Each one has a unique story, and their families want answers, and we were dedicated to finding those answers.
So I'm going to list the women that are missing, that haven't been found at all, that she's still investigating to see what happened to these women outside of the other 11
ones,
that
yeah.
were found. Martha Jo Lucher was 32 years old when she was reported missing by her mother in September 2003, after she hadn't been in contact with her family or children. Witnesses said that she and a friend were coming and going from a street corner, and Martha never returned. In 2009, after women were found buried on the West Mesa site, Martha's friend told investigators about a possible suspect and said she was worried about her when she hadn't seen her in years. Martha knew at least 2 of the women found at the West Mesa site. And like we said, like a lot of these women traveled in the same circles. They kind of all knew each other.
Yeah, they were connected in some way.
She went missing in 2003 in between the disappearance of 2 of the victims. But it's unknown if she was a victim of the same killer, and perhaps due to circumstances, the killer decided or was forced to dispose of her body elsewhere.
Anna Vigil was 20 years old when she was last seen in Albuquerque, New Mexico on January 21st, 2005. She has never been heard from again. She was reported missing on January 29th. Anna had been arrested for prostitution for the first time during a vice sting, according to Lopez's notes. When she was released from jail, dropped off downtown around midnight, she called her father for a ride. By the time he arrived, she was no longer there. Anna's boyfriend said that a couple days later, she went to Taco Bell to apply for a job, but he never heard from her again. Anna Vigil's mother, Stacy Love Vigil, spoke with the Journal from her home in Arkansas and said her daughter had moved to Los Lunas to live with her father as a teenager because she had met a boy. She was at that age, 16, when that's the most important thing in the world. Stacy Vigil said, and to my chagrin, I said, okay, well, if that's what you want to try, you could do the school year out there. But from that point on, literally things, I think, started spiraling. Anna Vigil had a son who was 4 months old when she went missing. Her son is now 16. Remembering her daughter as an absolute gorgeous baby who loved dressing up for Halloween. As she grew older, Stacy Vigil said she has no idea what happened to her, but she can't believe she's alive and hasn't contacted her or her son. My youngest daughter and I, she's 32 now, we talk sometimes and we'll say, what would you do if Anna walked through the door? I'd smack her in the face and kiss her at the same time. I'd say, how dare you? Come here, I love you.
I would probably have the same type of reaction. If
You're mad, you're angry, you're happy, you're ecstatic, you're in shock. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Felipa Victoria Gonzalez was 23 years old when she went missing. She went by the name Vicky. On April 27, 2005, she was released from jail and her mother picked her up. As soon as they got home, Vicky said she was going for a walk, left, and was never seen again. Her mother reported her missing. Vicky did not have any arrests for prostitution, but according to Lopez's notes, friends and family said she would do that sometimes to pay for a heroin addiction. She frequented the area near West Central. Gonzalez had a 2-year-old daughter who was staying with the child's father. She was struggling with postpartum depression. Vicky's mother said she doesn't like talking about it and it's hard enough carrying it in my heart, mind, and life. So she didn't really say much about.
Well, there we go with Central again, Central Avenue.
Central Avenue, West Central, that whole area was known for crime.
And then to know that she's suffering from postpartum.
Yeah. And addicted to heroin.
That's
a terrible combination.
Yeah. Nina Herron was 21 years old when she went missing in May of 2005. Nina didn't visit her parents' house to check on her 4-year-old son for 3 days, so they got worried and reported her missing. She lived in southeast Albuquerque, and Lopez said it was known that on a few occasions, Nina did prostitute to support her drug and alcohol addiction. Growing up, Nina was a really good kid and had a heart of gold. She went to middle school and she was a cheerleader. She wanted to graduate, but the drugs got in her way. About 3 years after Nina went missing, her mom, her husband, and their grandson moved to Edgewood to get the boy out of Albuquerque. I want him to live peacefully and without any worries because, we worried all our lives. We give our worries to him, Now, she said she keeps up with the news about the West Mesa case and frequently calls Lopez.
So I think a lot of these parents who have these girls missing, when they heard about the 11 that were found, it's like you don't want it to be them, but then again, you kind of
do because you want answers.
You want answers, yeah. So it's
because
kind of like
then
at
least okay, I don't have to sit here every night and wait for her to walk through the door.
Yeah, you know what happened.
Doesn't make it any better or any worse. It's just you need answers, you know?
Jillian Ortiz Henderson was 19 years old when she was reported missing by her mother in March 2006. She was added to a list of missing women more recently. Shortly before her mother reported her missing, police were dispatched to a domestic disturbance call between Jillian and her boyfriend. Jillian's friends and family told police they worried about her because they said she worked the streets to support her heroin addiction.
Chantel Waits was 29 years old and she went missing on March 15th, 2006. She was the mother of 4 children, ages 4, 8, 12, and 14, all of whom were raised by her 74-year-old grandfather and his wife. Wow, that's a job.
Yeah.
He hadn't heard a word from Chantel in 7 months, which was a very long time for her to go with not contacting him. For that reason, he decided to report her missing, stating Chantel had had a difficult life and had been involved in drugs and was currently living as a transient. Wow. The last sighting of her was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, although it remains unclear when exactly this was. Initially, they thought she was one of the women found in the West Mesa, but it was a mistake. He died in 2017. That must be so hard. Like
74 years old.
74 years old, taking care of children that age.
By the time the 4-year-old's 10, he's already in his 80s.
Yeah.
Leah Peebles was 23 when she disappeared. She moved from Fort Worth, Texas to Albuquerque, New Mexico on May 5th, 2006. She was temporarily residing with friends and disappeared on May 22nd, 2006. She left home to go on a date with a man she met at the Flying Star Cafe, where she planned to start working the following week. She never returned and has never been heard from again. Her vehicle later was found abandoned. Leah grew up in a middle-class Christian home in Fort Worth. Her parents stated she was molested by a distant relative as a toddler and raped by an acquaintance when she was 14. She was initially a good student at Carter Riverside High School and active as a cheerleader, in drama, and on the yearbook staff. But by her sophomore year, she had begun abusing drugs and alcohol and dropped out of her extracurricular activities. When Leah was 18, her parents put her in the Fort Worth Teen Challenge, a Christian residential drug and alcohol treatment facility for women. She stayed in the program for 21 months, graduated from cosmetology school, and took a job at a beauty salon, but soon relapsed and began using a variety of illegal drugs. She was convicted of drug offenses twice and served 2 short jail sentences. Leah was fired from her job at the salon after the second arrest, as her drug use had made her an unreliable employee. Her parents wanted her to return to rehab, but she decided to move to Albuquerque instead. She hoped to get a new start in life, making new and better friends, and stop her drug and alcohol abuse. After Leah disappeared, there were sightings of her reported in the Albuquerque area. The witnesses reported that she was calling herself Mia and working as a prostitute for a pimp called AJ, who supplied her with crack cocaine. Police questioned AJ, whose real name is Donald Sears, after he was arrested in Bakersfield, California, and he said he had never heard of Leah. Her father made about 11 trips to Albuquerque, as well as Phoenix, Arizona, and Las Vegas, to search for her. The last credible sighting was in the fall of 2006, and her father thought she may have been sold to a pimp in another city. Leah's father was killed in an accident in South Dakota in 2014. So we don't even really know if supposedly Leah is Mia. It kind of was like, they're saying there were sightings of her.
Right.
But this one's a huge mystery on what happened.
Right. What happened to her?
To her.
Yeah. Vanessa Reed was 24 years old when she went missing on June 13th, 2006. Vanessa and her sister were living in a motel off East Central. There we have Central again. Mm-hmm. And were both involved in drugs and prostitution. Vanessa was last seen leaving the room after an argument with her sister and has never been heard from again. She was not reported missing until after the skeletal remains of the 11 women were found, because her sister often used her information when she came into contact with the police.
So this Vanessa Reed, her sister never even said like, hey, my sister never came back. She never, because now her sister, when she'd come in contact with
is
police,
Vanessa Reed.
She's Vanessa Reed. She'd start using her name.
Yeah.
So it was as if Vanessa never disappeared. But when
right.
they started getting these bodies, then all of a sudden she's like, oh, that one of them could be my sister.
Could be my sister.
Yeah.
Police in Albuquerque say that they are still investigating the West Mesa serial killings, known officially as the 118th Street homicides. However, Albuquerque cops have also had their own internal problems to deal with. In late July, the city announced that the Department of Justice would monitor the Albuquerque Police Department after a civil investigation found that a pattern of excessive use of force, including deadly force, by officers resulted in 20 fatalities between 2009 and 2012, and concluded that the majority of these shootings were unconstitutional. Albuquerque and New Mexico law enforcement officials have also been racked by sex scandals in recent years, including accusations that a state police officer and an Albuquerque police officer sexually assaulted prostitutes.
It's just unfortunate because it sounds like maybe the families are right. A lot's not being done for these women because of the corrupt internal investigations that are happening and the corruption that's happening internally within the police department.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I just think like, what if that was my kid?
Yeah. So I know that was a lot to swallow and it was very similar, but the reason why we chose to look at this story is because I want to just make it that we're aware that it's not just a fluke what happened in the killing fields. It's not just, once in a while what happened in Gilgo State Beach. These aren't flukes or this is happening across
Everywhere.
the country,
Everywhere.
everywhere, where women are going missing.
And it's just, it's not talked about.
Nothing's being done. Like, I am surprised at how many women are going missing. It's like, I just really feel like not enough is being done to protect our women in the United States, and for them to have to turn to prostitution because there is not a lot of assistance out there. Single moms that are struggling in these neighborhoods and disadvantaged neighborhoods and then this drug addiction, these drugs that are out there.
We need to definitely start with mental health.
Yes.
I think mental health is a huge problem. And I mean, that's just a big thing to tackle.
Yeah. Take it from there.
It's very unfortunate.
But thank you so much for listening this week.
I definitely think that, like we've said in the other cases, that every victim is worth mentioning and worth talking about and having their story shared, because, you know, they all deserve to be talked about. And,
Absolutely.
you know, it's sad what this world has turned into, that there's so many, like, every week when we decide what we're going to talk about, there's just handfuls and handfuls of these cases out there that just, you know, it's
that
really
are swept
sad.
under the rug that aren't
It's sad how many that, you know, that we have to choose from,
that you're not
to talk
aware
about.
of,
And that I've never heard about before in my life.
just can't be the human race and get along.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah,
thank you
that's
so
a lot
much
to
for
ask.
listening. Definitely follow us. Please hit the subscribe, help us out, you know.
Yeah.
And
Thank
then-
you. And we love your comments. We love hearing your
Absolutely.
comments. Right.
Feedback's great.
We do try to respond to all of them. So yeah, keep them coming. If you have any information on this case, or again, any other cases that you would like us to talk about, please you can DM us. You can comment on YouTube. We have Instagram. We have TikTok, all at 50 States of Madness. Thank you to our Patreons for your support. We will see you all next week. And thank you to everybody who has purchased our merch. We do have racerback tank tops and a coffee mug out. Hopefully a couple more little gadgets to come. So
thank you.
yeah, so thank you to everybody who supports us.
Have a good week.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Be safe.